Dave Brown was sitting in a chair in his living room. Opposite his chair stood an empty couch. Between his chair and the sofa, there was a coffee table with 3 glasses of champagne. 1 full, 2 empty. There was a bottle of this drink in an ice bucket next to the table. Anyone watching him as he relaxed at 7:02 p.m. was a little concerned when he clearly said, "That's right, I hear her car in the driveway." But there were no observers. Dave was alone in the room. He continued to sit with a relaxed expression when the front door opened. He couldn't be seen from where he was sitting, but he immediately heard his wife's voice. "Where are you, Dave?" "In the living room, Deb." Dave stood up abruptly as his wife entered the archway. She was holding the hand of a man 5 years younger than her 49. He was thin, of average height, wearing a business suit. In her other hand, she was holding an orange A4 envelope. Dave, this is Michael. Michael, this is my husband, Dave." Noticing that she was looking away and was generally nervous, Dave took 3 steps and warmly shook the intruder's hand. "I'm very glad to meet you, Michael. Do you mind if I call you Mike?" "Not at all, sir. Can I offer you a glass of champagne? Please have a seat." Dave watched as 2 very embarrassed people sat down on the sofa and took the offered glasses after he filled them. "To your health. Now, could you tell this simple soul what's going on?" Deborah and Mike looked at each other. Mike nodded slightly and squeezed her hand. Dave, this isn't a very nice thing to talk about, so I'll just say it straight. Michael and I fell in love. I would like to get a divorce so we can get married." She stopped, expecting her husband's anger. She looked up from the floor to see Dave's expression. It would be terrible. She just knew it. She didn't expect his face to remain neutral. Unconsciously, she moved a little closer to Mike. "Okay, Deb, are these divorce papers?" Deb looked up again, stunned. She had rehearsed this scene in her head many times, but never, not even in her wildest dreams, had it looked like this. She looked at Mike and tried to convey with her eyes, "I don't know what to say." He took the envelope from Deb and placed it on the table. "Yes, Dave, that's true. I think you will find them very reasonable. Deb doesn't ask you for anything other than her car. Included in the package is her statement of relinquishment of this house, your car, all your joint assets, and your retirement fund. Everything is signed and notarized on our part. I must warn you that I am a lawyer and therefore everything is fine, but feel free to hire your own representative to put your mind at ease. Well, I must say, you are both very generous." Deb looked very excited, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "It was Mike's idea, Dave. In fact, he insisted. He said it's bad enough that he's stealing your wife without taking your hard-earned assets. This was not my motivation by any means, but Mike is quite rich. Even without your money, we will have more than you and I ever had." Maybe things would have been different if you had gotten a job after the kids were older and helped with the finances, Deb." Deb looked down again. "So, Mike, is your wife going to give a similar speech, or has she already received one?" "No. My wife died 8 years ago. I am a widower." "I'm sorry to hear, really." "Thank you, Dave. It hurt like hell for a year or so, but time heals all wounds, as they say. Look, I really regret this, but I met Deb and she was like the missing half of my soul. I didn't think I'd ever be full again. I wanted to tell you that I have been in love with your wife for several months now. It's okay, Mike. I never hold a grudge. Please marry her with my blessing." Mike and Deb exchanged stunned glances. Deb, because it wasn't at all what she expected. Then she felt great relief. A few months ago, she made Michael believe that her marriage to Dave was over, that they tried to save him, but there was little hope. She knew that the weak point in her plan was Dave's reaction, which could make Mike realize that this was not entirely true. That's why she begged Mike to do it without confrontation. Mike insisted that real men solve problems head-on. He did not give in to persuasion. Mike was stunned because even after Deb told him that her marriage was on its last legs, He expected a more angry reaction. From Deb's descriptions, he formed a mental image of Dave. From what she said, he was a large, uneducated man who was used to solving problems with his fists. Mike toyed with the idea of bringing a bodyguard with him tonight, but eventually dismissed the idea. In the depths of his soul, he thought that if the offended husband hit him a little, it might ease his own conscience. His own sense of decency weighed on him. "So, Deb, I assume you met Mike at one of your girls' parties?" Deb nodded toward the coffee table. "One of those girls' nights out that you assured me was completely harmless and didn't threaten our marriage when I asked." This time, Deb nodded toward the floor. "I think this is a lesson for you, Mikey boy." Mike looked at Deb. Deb's gaze moved to an area of the floor a little further away from Mike. "So, what happens to people now? Come on, Deb. You have to have a plan. You're giving me the house, so I'm guessing you were going to pack up your things and move in with him. I won't bother you." "I was going to do this tomorrow while you were at work." "The locks will be changed by tomorrow. I'm sure your lawyer friend will agree that this is a wise move on my part. It's easier if you do it now, isn't it?" Deb and Mike stood up to go upstairs. "How about we talk, Mike? Deb can start packing." "Come on, Mike, let's chat. I think you owe me at least this." Deb was torn between wanting to avoid this truly awkward situation and having to bear witness to everything that was said. In the end, Mike made the decision for her, sitting back down. "Go, Deb. I promise not to hurt him. I just want to chat. Until we get divorced, I will feel responsible for your safety. I just want to make sure he has your best interests at heart. Besides, you made the decision to leave me. I don't see the point in trying to talk you out of it. Our marriage is obviously dead." Both men watched her walk up the stairs and disappear. "I must say, you are very reasonable, Dave." "It's okay, Mike. Between you and me, I haven't felt Deb's love for about a year now. I guess that's when you met. It will indeed be a relief. I have no desire to condemn both of us to a loveless marriage." "That's still very nice of you, Dave." "You're welcome, Mike. Now, as a lawyer, you know that whenever you sell a car or house, you are legally obligated to point out any known defects to the new owners." Mike laughed. "Well, slavery is dead, and I don't think Deb would like being seen as property that needs to be transferred, but I see what you mean, Dave." Dave smiled, too. He correctly guessed that Mike was an intelligent and decent person. "Okay. Now, please believe that what I'm about to tell you is not dictated by malicious intent. I just want to point out some of Deb's flaws that may not be obvious after a year of dating. Besides, her future happiness is important to me. After all, I've loved her for 27 years. I would also like to share everything that I tried to do to make her happy, but obviously failed. This way, you will know not to waste your time on the same thing." Mike nodded. He knew that what was about to happen probably wouldn't be entirely altruistic in intent, but he felt he had an obligation to listen to this innocent man. "Right. I'm guessing Deb is back on the pills?" Mike nodded again, feeling a little awkward. It was tantamount to admitting that he slept with this guy's wife. "Yes, she takes pills. I had no idea she ever stopped. She was on the pill when we met, but about 12 months after we got married, she came off it. She said they suppressed her sexual appetite. From then on, it was condoms for me. I can't stand these damn things. They take away all the spontaneity, and I don't know about you, but I struggle to get by without them." "Yes, I know what you mean, Dave." "Then, when we decided to stop at 2 children, she started using condoms as an excuse not to make love as often. I begged her to go back on the pills, but she refused, saying she didn't want to swallow artificial chemicals every day. Since then, our lovemaking has dropped from several times a week to several times a month, then to 0 about a year ago." Mike didn't answer. He knew Deb was very careful about what food she ate and chose chemical-free options wherever possible. Sex with her was still exciting and happened at least 3 times a week, even with restrictions on their meetings. "I know this is very ungentlemanly, Mike, but I want to know if my wife satisfies your sexual needs." because I was denied a lot of things and then we stopped having sex completely until recently. I just got tired of getting knocked down and stopped asking. Maybe you'd like to write in your diary to keep track of any sudden lows every month or so." Dave paused so Mike could add something, but Mike didn't take the opportunity. And here's another thing that I noticed only a couple of years after our wedding. One day I looked around and suddenly realized that almost everything I owned before Deb was gone. A bed, clothes, a sofa, and photos of old girlfriends, although, to be honest, I found them in the attic. I don't know if all women do this or if it's just Deb, but it was as if she wanted to clear the nest of previous female influences. Again, Dave paused, and again Mike remained silent. He thought about his new bed and sheets. Then he remembered his conversation with Deb a week ago, about the portrait of his first wife, the woman he loved dearly until circumstances cut her out of his life. "I hope you're better at spotting her lies than I am, Mike. Just 3 weeks ago, I asked if she still loved me and if things were good with us. She looked me straight in the eye and said yes. She did the same thing she always did, looked me in the eyes until I broke eye contact. I can't believe it only took 3 weeks to fall out of love so much." Mike reeled slightly from the surprise of this conversation and from all the information Dave was trying to force him to absorb. Something about those last 2 sentences was alarming, but he didn't have time to pinpoint the source, so he focused on the only aspect he could absorb. "Don't worry, Dave. I am a lawyer. I spent 20 years learning how to spot liars. They always give themselves away." "Fine. Again, just some advice that you can take or not. Watch to see if she takes off her rings when she goes to visit her sister. You might want to check out her underwear drawer. I advise you not to trust her blindly, as I did. It seemed to me that she was completely incapable of deception, but obviously I am stupid. What more can I say? Oh yeah, if she stays true to form, she'll probably stop going to the gym in about 6-12 months and gain some weight." At that moment, Dave stood up, took a photo album from the shelf, and began flipping through the pages. Here are a couple of photos from 2 years ago, when she started going to bachelorette parties. As you can see, her face and ass are plump, but after 2 children, who would be surprised by this? Mike turned a few pages and saw a plumper version of his bride, wearing much less makeup than he had ever seen. He was a little taken aback by the difference a little makeup made. He continued flipping through the pages. "Is this Deb's mother? I see a strong resemblance." "Yes, it is. Wait a minute. As you can see, she was a beautiful woman. This is her when she was about 50. She was a very glamorous woman." Dave picked up another album and opened it to the page. He expected Mike to say the obvious. "Lord, how old is she here?" "Around 55. She was one of those women who, once they hit menopause, around 52 or 53, quickly lost their looks. However, she accepted it very gracefully, simply saying that she thanked God for the outer beauty she had been blessed with for so long." Dave watched Mike alternately look at the 2 photographs. "And now I promise to tell you about all my mistakes, because of which she could not love me. I suggest trying a different approach. Mine was clearly unsuccessful." Dave paused to pour the champagne. "About 25 years ago, she wanted a wedding. I tried to object, saying that we would be better off investing in a house, but she said that if I had faith that we would be together forever, then I would not save on such an important day for her. If you want, I can find you a copy of our wedding vows. From memory, we adhere to the traditional love, honor, obedience, and abandonment of all others. If you try something different, you might end up doing better than me. Not really important to you, but don't bother working your fingers to the bone and doing a bunch of crap over time so she can get the flash house she's always dreamed of." This clearly didn't deter her. "In fact, we're probably here because I refused to pay for the facelift she wanted, preferring to invest in our retirement. She can be quite persistent when her heart is set on something. You probably noticed." Mike nodded, wondering if this characteristic of Deb was truly the admirable quality he still believed. "So, I shouldn't have thought that I was acting smartly, inviting her on a date every month to discuss everything that concerns me or our relationship, which begins to irritate or causes the slightest indignation. Our last date was less than a month ago, and she didn't say anything. A man of your caliber, I'm sure, can come up with something better." At that moment, Mike noticed a twinkle in Dave's eyes and suddenly realized what he was up to. However, he made some good points. The idea of Deb being completely free of guile was very much at odds with some of his own thoughts of late. He was so taken aback by Dave's obvious amusement at the whole scenario that he again ignored the internal alarm. Dave continued to talk, even though they both obviously knew Deb had stopped coming down the stairs once she was within earshot. "Keep an eye on the lists of things she plans to remove from the house. This is a good hint that she already disdains the marriage and is looking for a replacement. It won't change much about what happens, but it will allow you to prepare for the end game she has planned and encourage you to start digging for more evidence." Mike blinked and looked around. For the first time, he saw 3 champagne glasses and an ice bucket, a clear indication that all 3 present knew about today's meeting in advance, when there should have been only 2 of them. His usual highly observant nature missed the clues. Dave watched Mike's eyes dart. "Yes, I knew it would be today. Deb called me twice today to make sure I would be home by 7. Mike tore his eyes away from Dave and looked to where Deb was halfway down the stairs. Deb resumed her descent, clearly pretending that she had not heard the last minutes of the conversation. "Dave, do you want to talk about which family photo I can take now or some other time?" Dave ignored her and leaned towards the opposite couch, never taking his eyes off his rival. "The last thing I did wrong was forgive Deb when I first caught her cheating on our marriage." "What?" Mike asked. "No," escaped Deborah's lips as she retreated into the kitchen. "Yes, it was right after the birth of our second child. I forgave her because she and our counselor convinced me that it was an isolated mistake caused by postpartum depression. I often wondered if I was too soft on her. Perhaps a tougher line at the time could have prevented a recurrence. I justified my actions by saying that I was acting in the best interests of the children. They grew up to be good people, so I hope I did right by them. For her sake, I hope that you will be generous enough to forgive her when your time comes. I don't know what to say, Dave." "You don't have to say anything, Mike. Just answer me. Look into your heart and ask yourself if you would forgive your late wife if you found her as your lover in your own bed." For the first time, Mike lost his composure. He leaned forward. Out of the corner of his eye, Dave noticed some movement and saw pale-faced Deborah standing in the kitchen doorway. "My wife would never show me such disrespect. We loved each other too." "Wait a minute. You said, the first time Deb cheated on me. Were there other times?" "No. Only twice. Then and now." Deb ran out of the kitchen. "No!" she screamed desperately. "I'm done packing, Mike. If you take my bags, we can get out of here right now." "Calm down, Deborah." The last was said in a quiet but inexorable voice. Surprisingly, the voice belonged to Mike. Deb stopped in her tracks. Mike turned back to Dave. "Deborah assured me that she didn't cheat because you had an open marriage, Dave. Did she look you in the eye when she talked about it, Mike?" Mike looked at Dave, then at the cowering Deb, then back at Dave. Dave saw in Mike's eyes the sudden realization that he wasn't as good at spotting liars as he thought. "What did she tell you about the state of our marriage, Mike?" "She said it's been shaky for a few years, Dave. That you had been seeing a psychologist for a while, but neither of you had any hope." Dave didn't answer, just stared at Mike as he continued talking to fill the void. "Now, I think that doesn't really fit with what you were saying about still going on dates and asking if she loved you." Dave continued to look into Mike's eyes again. He chose the exact moment when Mike realized that he had been played like a complete sucker. An expression that could easily be interpreted as self-loathing flashed across the little man's face. Mike turned to the frozen Deborah. "You're a damn bitch. You have turned me into the person I despise most. A man who fucks other people's wives without their husband's knowledge." Hearing this statement, Deb dropped to her knees. Mike was suddenly speechless and interested in the same patch of carpet that had so fascinated Deb before. Finally, he pulled himself together and looked at Dave again. "Please, Dave, you have to believe me, I had no idea." "Don't worry, Mike, I told you she's a good liar." "God, I wish she had told me that we have an open marriage. Then I might have gotten laid last year." The deliberate use of humor in a very tense situation seemed to work. Mike relaxed a little, but remained silent. "Does this mean that the engagement is broken?" Yes, definitely. In that case, I want to introduce you to a couple of people. John, Alice." At that moment, the door to the basement opened. Hearing the noise, Mike turned around and saw a young man and woman approaching. "Mike, I want to introduce you to my son John and daughter Alice." They listened to our conversation through a microphone. John graduated from law school 2 years ago, and Alice received her degree this year. John and Alice shook hands with a confused Mike. John then took the envelope from the table and began to dispassionately examine its contents. Dave turned to his daughter. "Do you believe me now, Alice?" "Yes, Dad. There is no doubt that she is a cold, cunning schemer." All eyes turned to the groan. Deb was still kneeling, but her head was now on the floor. Feeling the silence, she raised her head and met 4 accusing gazes. She jumped up and ran out the front door. No one made the slightest attempt to stop or follow her. John calmly finished looking through the contents of the envelope. "Everything seems okay, Dad." "Okay, thank you. Now, who wants a beer? This fizzy cat pee is good, but I need beer to get rid of the taste in my mouth." I think I have to go. Stay here, little Mikey. We still need to figure something out." For example, "Well, I can forgive you for sleeping with that stupid bitch, like she has an open marriage and all, but I have to decide whether to rip your head off and spit on your neck for trying to steal her." Mike looked at the other man, noting that he was a head taller and much larger. Then he looked into the eyes and saw the already familiar shine. Dave decided to calm down a little. "John does the same thing as you, Mike." By this time, Mike was no longer surprised that Dave knew so much about him. "How is your current job, John?" "The hours are crap, and the salary sucks." "Would you like to come and work with me?" "Of course, yes." Dave smiled. "Then the question remains about supporting my ex-wife until she finds a job. She no longer has a home or money." With a growing sense of relief, Mike entered the new topic. "I'm really sorry, Dave. Once she lied to me, she broke the implied contract we had. In case of violation of the contract, ownership passes to the previous copyright holder." "Yes, but morally?" "Don't talk to me about morality. I'm a lawyer." "John, do you have a dictionary? I'm a little vague about what this actually means." Everyone laughed. "No, seriously, Mike. I think you should keep an eye on her until she gets back on her feet. If you play your cards right, you can pretend you're thinking about keeping her and cheer yourself up in bed for a while." "Ugh, no, I can't do that. But I'll make sure she's okay. Not for her, but for you. I admire craftsmanship wherever I see it, and I was completely surpassed tonight, wasn't I? Have you ever thought about a career in law, Dave? The way you threw me off balance, passing off negatives as positives and not giving me time to think, was worthy of the best prosecutor I've ever seen." Dave smiled modestly, but said nothing. He loved his job and the people who surrounded him at work. "So, 4 beers?" For the first time ever, Dave looked away, until he is sure that the tears that have accumulated in the corners of his eyes have disappeared. He will no longer look into his eyes. By this time, Deborah Brown was already 700 meters away. She was walking quickly and accelerating, as if her heels were fried. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.